Shinobi is considered one of the hardest games on the PlayStation 2. Now, I didn't play it when it released, but I was eager to find out just how challenging it was. So, join me as I break down the game's difficulty and answer the question, how hard was Shinobi actually? Shinobi made its gaming debut in arcades back in 1987. It was a 2D side-scroller topped off with hack-and-slash action. You'd play as Joe Masashi, a ninja who's trying to take down a criminal enterprise. The arcade joysticks allowed Joe to move in 8 directions, but movement alone wasn't going to kill enemies, so what else could he do? Players could throw shurikens, assault enemies with punches and kicks, as well as use ninjutsu, which is pretty much ninja magic. Like the time a ninja asked if I wanted to see their magic in a back alley. Well, they said they were a ninja. Shinobi was the most successful arcade unit in Japan of December 1987, and one of the highest grossing units in the United States in 1988 and 89. The success of Shinobi resulted in more games being created, with 13 so far in the series, and there's also a film adaptation in the works. But you're not here for the history of Shinobi, so let's move on to how the game plays. Shinobi is broken down into 8 levels that each have 2 stages. You'll platform and fight your way through each stage, and if you do this successfully, you'll be rewarded with a boss battle. If you die in a level, you'll simply respawn a few steps away from where you died. Except, that's not what happens at all. In fact, it couldn't be any further away from the truth. If you die, you'll have to repeat the whole level again. There are no checkpoints, which means you'll have to complete each stage flawlessly. There is, however, one exception to this rule. If you die in a boss fight, which you will, you can retry from the encounter. You won't need to run through the entire stage again. This shows the game devs weren't a complete bunch of sadists, but they did want players to suffer. You'll be playing as Hotsuma, and your sword will be the primary weapon of choice for dealing damage. You can throw shurikens, which freeze enemies in place, and can use ninjutsu magic for large-scale AoE attacks. Now, with the basics out of the way, let's break down how each level plays and work out how hard the game really was. In the first stage, you'll be running through the city and fighting with ninjas that don't deal much damage. There's tanks that can take chunks from your health bar, but they're slow and don't pose much of a threat. Smoke coming from the vents will chip your health bar, but these are easily avoided. Now, the boss for this stage is a possessed demon helicopter with some additional ninjas thrown into the mix. You'll need to avoid the helicopter's rockets and machine gun fire, and if you stay underneath it, none of its attacks can even hit you. It takes a lot of damage, and I ignored the extra ninjas to focus on the boss. The helicopter was dispatched without any issues, and at this point I believed I was going to steamroll the game. It must have been a bunch of games journalists that said the game was hard. I mean, come on, I took down Melania, wiped the floor with Ishin the Sword Saint, and sent the Orphan of Kos back to Lumbridge. This PS2 game was going to be a walk in the park, baby. The second part of the stage throws some new flying enemies at you, and you'll also have to be wary of the smoke vents. Now, they can damage you even if it doesn't look like they're making contact, but this was a lesson learned. Failing jumps can be a killer, but if you're at the start of the level, it's not that big of a deal. Now, I did get stuck at this wall for a while, as I had no idea you could wall run. The game doesn't introduce the mechanic to you, but that's older games in a nutshell. The boss of this stage will dash towards you and knock you back, and you'll have to be cautious of the roof edge as you can fall off. Apart from that one attack, he moves slowly towards you and spawns some additional ninjas. Now, the trick here is to bait him towards the edge and then jump over him. He'll take full damage and you'll repeat this until he's dead. Now, he did kill me a couple of times. On one attempt I was just about to kill him, and then I got pushed off the edge too. Sometimes he didn't take any damage when falling off, but this was water under the bridge as it was a simple boss fight. Stage 2 removes your training wheels and introduces you to a mechanic that forces you to play on the offensive. Hotsuma's sword, Akujiki, becomes cursed and must feed on enemy souls to satisfy its hunger. You can see Akujiki's hunger meter to the left in red that slowly diminishes. Killing enemies will stop the drain and refill the meter, but the ideal way to restore your meter is performing a Tate attack. If you strike an enemy, they will momentarily freeze in place. You've then got a few seconds to hit the next enemy and so on, and with each attack you'll freeze the next enemy in place too. Your sword will glow a different colour, meaning that your attack power is being boosted. If you manage to attack all the enemies on the screen at once, they'll die simultaneously and you'll get a very cool cutscene. A successful Tate attack will fully replenish Akujiki's hunger meter, so you're encouraged to always go for a Tate attack. So basically you've got a super OP sword right at the start of the game. Except I failed to mention a key point. If you don't kill enemies quick enough, Akujiki will drain your health. This effect will speed up the longer you go on without kills. This means you must stay aggressive throughout the playthrough, and if you play too passively, you'll be killed by your own sword. This means you'll have to juggle enemies, platforming, enemies whilst platforming, bosses, your take meter combo, and the health drain mechanic at once. Back to the stage, some new enemies are thrown at you wearing Gita, like Netero, but this area wasn't challenging. You'll fight 2 possessed humans as the final boss, who spawn in some wolves every so often. I pretty much tanked through all their hits and threw some shurikens to stun them in place, beating them on the first attempt. I was running around with low health at times in the next area, as enemies weren't dropping healing items, which looked like purple orbs. Now the best way to restore your health is to perform Tate attacks, as it does make the enemies drop more orbs. Here I fell off an edge and died, and again failing a jump, and one more time just as I picked up a health item. Yes, it was annoying having to repeat the stage again, but I was still getting used to the control scheme. You'll then have to fight another demon helicopter, and to those saying they're reusing bosses already, well, you'd be dead wrong. See, this one's on fire. I died a couple of times to the chopper, but it was a carbon copy of the fight from the first stage, and it didn't take long to beat. I was a quarter way through the game at this point, and so far we hadn't experienced anything challenging. Would the rest of the game be a cakewalk? Let's move on to stage 3 and find out. This stage introduces dogs that are wearing armour and have swords. Their armour can reflect your attacks, and when they coordinated as a group, fucked me up pretty badly. There was nothing else worthy of note in this level, so let's move straight on to the boss. Now this guy really pissed me off. He teleports to another location every single time you hit him. He's also guarded by the annoying dogs with shields, and if you attack them head on, they'll just resist your hit. When he teleports, you have to quickly get to his next location. If you don't get there fast enough, he heals back to full health. I had to retry this fight over, and over, and over again. I finally beat this asshole after 10 attempts, and my final words are fuck the stupid dogs wearing armour, and this teleporting prick as well, good riddance. The next area features a web mechanic that slows you down. When caught in the web, you're unable to jump, and your evade is sluggish. There are cocoons that spawn spiders that you need to destroy, and I did get close to dying due to the health drain mechanic. The hunger meter is quite lenient though, and you're given plenty of time to find an enemy to stop the drain effect. It's only when you play super passively that this mechanic is detrimental. The stage 3 boss is a giant spider, which makes sense due to the introduction of the web mechanic as well as the arachnid enemies. The spider will shoot some webs at you and summons minions, but the strategy is a simple one. Chain some attacks on the smaller enemies to power up Akujiki, perform a wall run, and then attack the spider for giant damage. The spiders barely hit you, and the boss's attacks are simple to dodge. The only thing that will slow you down are the webs on the floor, but this was way easier than the previous teleporting boss, and with that said, let's move on to stage 4. In stage 4A, there's some new enemies that shoot fire projectiles at you, and a few tanks for good measure. Now this stage was easy, but the end boss gave me some issues. The boss also uses flame magic and teleports after taking a few hits. You'll start to see a pattern with bosses teleporting after taking damage. To add insult to injury, he also explodes before vanishing. No homo, so you'll have to evade after getting in a few hits. I kept getting killed by this guy and was starting to get tilted. Like all bosses in the game, the best way to deal with them is to build up your take gauge by hitting enemies and then hitting him with a powered up sword attack. But I couldn't get to him in time before the take build up would run out. At this point I was starting to feel the challenge as I started shouting at my monitor. After 10 attempts I managed to barely kill him, but as you can see here, I had a sliver of health. The real challenge of Shinobi was building up your take meter high enough to then 1 or 2 shot the main boss. Now I wasn't very good at this, so I knew I was in for a rough time for the rest of the playthrough. Also, fire ninjutsu doesn't work on this guy. Now I understand why, but it was still incredibly lame. Stage 4B wasn't any easier. The level is filled with flying enemies that are harder to reach, as well as lava that is very easy to fall into. Akujiki's hunger meter was always on the low, and health orbs weren't dropping often. This meant I just had to get good and keep redoing the stage until I got it right. The stage was annoying as the flying enemies would also hover just outside of your range and they'd sidesweep your shurikens, preventing them from being stunned. The lava was pissing me off, I kept failing the jumps, and the relics you need to destroy to open the doors were in hard to reach areas where it was easy to fall back into the lava. I was always on the verge of death with low health as well as Akujiki's hunger meter. This level was rough, but it wasn't over yet. The boss was a giant flame moth that also uses fire magic. There's a series of platforms that sit above lava, and yes, you can fall back into it. The platforming was more difficult than the boss, which wasn't helped by the camera angle. I kept falling into the lava as I was messing up the jumps, but was also getting screwed over by the camera. Additional enemies spawn in that also spam you with flame projectiles, and I was struggling with this guy. You're constantly taking chip damage and either falling or getting pushed into the lava. To add insult to injury, I was building up my tape meter, getting the sword to purple energy, which meant it would do massive damage, only to have the boss reflect my attack and do no damage. After several more attempts, the game mechanics started to click, and just like that, we two-shot the boss and pick up our first A ranking. I learned here that you can build up your tape meter in the air by evading to each enemy after a successful hit. I died a lot trying to get this technique down, but I felt like I'd improved, and had a glimmer of hope I could still beat the game. This was the halfway point of Shinobi, and I changed my mind on the game's difficulty. This wasn't the cakewalk I thought it would be, and spoiler alert, there was more punishment to come. In stage 5, you have to platform through a city that's been flooded by water. You can fall into the water, and it can also submerge platforms that you're standing on, which will both kill you. Now, the platforming wasn't difficult. I was getting plenty of take kills, and my main cause of death was the water. The boss here had a giant shield he'll hit you with, and summon some minions. His attack patterns were simple to dodge, and the minions were just fodder to build up your tape meter. I did die a couple of times, and I had issues with the lock-on system targeting the boss, as opposed to the minions. But apart from that, it was an easy fight. The next phase was a straight up boss fight. The conventional platforming throughout a level was absent here. Now the boss opens with spamming ranged attacks, which can be dodged by evading left or right. You'll be able to hit him once before he teleports away. You'll then have to evade again, as he does AoE damage just before teleporting. Eventually he'll spawn some snakes, which you should know by now is your cue to build up the tape meter. Now I did find it tricky to get the final hit on the boss, as he'd just reflect the attack. This was frustrating, as the window to hit a lot of bosses after building up meter was tiny. After a few deaths, I eventually took him down, and he really wasn't that much of a challenge. Stage 6 was a turning point in the difficulty. There's lasers on walls that can damage you, and the platforming parts have water pits that will straight up kill you. These were tricky due to the inability to jump or dash when exhausted, which means you must watch yourself plummet to your death. I died so many times here that I got tired of fighting the enemies again and again, so I decided to run past them. My frustration grew further when I missed this ledge, and I was close to crashing out when this guy pushed me off the platform right near the end of the mission. Just to reiterate guys, you have to do the whole mission again every single time you die. The power of editing makes the run back look seamless, but most of these missions take 10 minutes to get through. This was one of the most frustrating stages in the game, and was a chore to get through as opposed to being fun. This stage was difficult, but the boss, oh man, let's talk about it. Let me introduce you to one of the most unfair, rage-inducing fights in the game. In my first encounter, he spammed me with so many fast-moving projectiles that I was essentially stun-locked to death. He'll also summon minions who shoot lasers at you, which slows you down, leaving you wide open to get melted by the boss. After a lucky run, I got him down to low health. Just as I go to finish him off, he tanks my hit and kills me. My controller nearly went through the window. It took me hours to kill this arsehole, and I was thinking of calling it quits on several occasions. This guy had me absolutely raging. If I'd streamed this fight, my crash out would have been on live stream fails. I wasn't even happy when I killed him, I was fucking heated. Getting him one shot and then dying, successfully building up the tape meter to purple, and then the attack being blocked, being confined to a small corridor boss room. The frustrating of getting through the stage and getting stun-locked by the Make-A-Wish metangs made this incredibly difficult. No other stage or boss in the game had me crashing out this hard, up until this point. Fortunately, the next stage is far more forgiving, and it's also just a boss fight. The boss will fire projectiles at you, which can be avoided by jumping or dodging through them. You'll need to build your tape meter by stunning the minions when they spawn in. You can then jump and strike the boss's face, although there's a gap between the boss and the platform, so you can fall to your death after hitting him. I did think this was a bit trollish by the devs, and that didn't really need to be there. If any of the devs are watching this, I just want to say fuck you. I'm only joking. I don't insult game developers, but in all seriousness, fuck you. This guy took me around 5 attempts, and there wasn't too much to discuss. He was one of the easier bosses in the game, which is crazy considering how hard the previous one was. Here you can see I kill him with one shot, and just like that we get our first S ranking, killing the boss in 41 seconds. Now after completing 6 stages, you've made it through 75% of the game. The difficulty had ramped up, and it was living up to its hard reputation. But you better believe there was more suffering to come, so let's move on to the last two stages. Stage 7 returns to a standard level based format after facing 2 bosses in a row. The enemies here took more hits to die, and the platforming areas were tricky. I died a couple of times trying to make this waterfall jump, and after restarting the level a couple more times, I got past it. There's several more waves of enemies here, and failing to get tape build up means you'll be chopping away at their health for longer due to their increased hit points. Now what fucked me off was Hotsuma failing to make this jump right at the end of the level, which was one of the longest in the game. You're a ninja, how are you failing to make this jump? This wasn't difficult, it was just tedious, because I died at this jump a couple more times. Every time he didn't make the jump, you'd have to do a 10-minute run back, and after several more attempts, I'd make it back to the jump, and got pushed off the edge by this arsehole. I was seriously starting to lose my temper again. I know I just mentioned it, but it takes like 10 minutes to get back here. And like most people watching this video, we've got work in the morning, and I was getting tilted fucking around with this jump for so long. I did eventually calm down. Until this arsehole failed to make the jump again. My dude, just grab the fucking ledge. You're a ninja with superpowers and are doing everything in your power to commit seppuku. If you make it to the boss before deleting the game, then congratulations, bonus points if you didn't break your controller. This boss has lightning fast reflexes, but you can stand on top of these boxes to wait for the minions to be summoned. Now the boss can't hit you, and you can build up your tape meter in relative peace. This was another easy boss that I'd say was deserved for the nonsense we just had to put up with. We all know who the real main boss was anyways. The second part of the stage is another boss fight without any level exploration. I wasn't sure if the devs were crunched for time or if they designed the game with boss fights as a stage. Now this fight wasn't much of a challenge either. The enemy walks slowly at you and you can evade directly through his attacks. The issue here was that the enemies were spread out, which made it more challenging to build up your tape meter. They can also freeze you in place like a certain other boss, because why wouldn't they? But remember, I'm an old dog that learned some new tricks, baby, so I dispatched this trick with no issues. Despite being unsure if I'd be able to complete the game, we'd made it to the final stage. I was getting myself hyped up, and then the main villain said this.
All that is left is for him to come.
I wasn't sure what his intentions were anymore, but this was a very sus thing to say, especially to a ninja with superpowers. In this level, you're traversing a palace that's floating in the air. Why is it floating? Because ninjas. There's a lot of trash mobs here that don't put up much of a fight, and you'll have to avoid falling to your death, which was the real challenge here. This area started to give me flashbacks to stage 7. You know, the one where Hotsuma refused to grab the ledge. I had to repeat this stage numerous times due to failed jumps, and after a while I just started running past the enemies. If you're not going to make the jump, then I'm not going to kill the enemies. And yes, this was a very childish way of approaching the level, but it proved super effective, like using arm thrust on a bishop. Similar to how the villain wants to use arm thrust on Hotsuma's d. The lack of checkpoints in the game did make this area tedious because it was so easy to fail the platforming areas. When I eventually got to the end of the level, I was surprised that there was no boss fight. I was totally fine with this, as the platforming areas were the real boss of the stage anyways. My kill percentage here was low because I decided to run past the enemies after a while, and when you died as many times as I did, you'd probably run past them too. We start off inside the castle for the final level, and we started off well, with Hotsuma failing to make a jump in trademark fashion. And again, followed by the enemies playing pinball with me, refusing to let me grab the ledge. Now this level was just annoying, but it did look cool with the black and gold theme. I got tired of going through this level, so yes, I did start running past the enemies again. Especially when I knew I was close to the end, I couldn't be asked to do a 10-minute run back. And that brings us on to the most frustrating boss fight in the game. You know, the guy that dropped the sus comment. At the start of the battle, you'll need to hit the boss once and he'll then disappear. During this phase, he doesn't actually take any damage and will teleport once hit, but so far, so good. After you've hit him a few times, that's when the real fight starts. He then adds some spells into the mix. He's got a slow moving fireball, a series of projectiles that you'll need to evade through, an ice blast that can freeze you, and a lightning attack that drops several times. He's also got an attack where he teleports to your location repeatedly and starts throwing hands. I never dodged this attack sequence. He would always tag me at least once. He eventually summons some minions who you'll have to use to build up tape meter, but they're all over the place. I died here to the instant teleport, I had to restart the fight here as I messed up the tape meter, and then again for good measure. Here the damage from a fireball pushes me off the edge, and then this minion decides it's not going to take any damage, completely ruining my tape build-up. At this point it was just easier to retry the fight. Check this nonsense. I get full tape meter, which is difficult to do with this guy. I go in to get the final hit, and he just shrugs it off. And then kills me. I remembered the promotional trailer mentioning this before the game released. Shinobi, the new hit game on the PlayStation 2 where you play as a ninja. Sometimes the bosses will take damage, sometimes they won't. Fuck you. These pieces of paper not only run away from you, preventing tape build-up, but their hitboxes were also inconsistent. After 3 rage-filled hours, I beat the most frustrating boss in the game. With that notch on my belt, I'd beaten what many say to be the hardest game on the PlayStation 2. It was tough to get tape meter build-up on this guy. His minions have tiny hitboxes with them taking no damage on several occasions. But there's more. Loads of the minions spawn in and can stun lock you in place, only for you to get tagged by a projectile from the boss. Now the boss's projectiles were simple to evade, if you see them coming, but if you're trying to build Tate, you're most likely focused on the minions and can't always see where he is due to the constant teleporting. He's also got the surprise teleport attack, which I was never able to dodge. He can repel your frontal attacks and your time to hit him is slim. I got a C ranking for completing the game, but I didn't care. That C was basically an S ranking for putting up with all the nonsense the game had to throw at me, but I've kept you guys watching for long enough. Up next is the conclusion, where I'll discuss my thoughts on the game's difficulty and if it deserves the title of the hardest game on the PlayStation 2. Shinobi is a challenging game by design. Each of its components when combined is what makes the game hard, but what exactly does that mean? Well, let me explain. Each level is relatively short and can be completed in around 10 minutes, but that's only if you don't die. It's easy to mistime a platforming jump and fall to your death, meaning you'll need to redo the entire stage again. You've also got the health drain mechanic, which means you need to constantly be on the offensive. There are no checkpoints in each level, which as I've just mentioned, means you have to run through the stage again. Some of the boss fights were tough and took several attempts to take down, whereas some, even in the late game, were pushovers. Now to answer the main question. Does Shinobi deserve the title of the hardest PlayStation 2 game? Well, I haven't played all the PS2 games, but this is the hardest PS2 game that I have played. There's no hand-holding. This is an old school game where the only way to beat it is with practice and a bit of luck. But to conclude, Shinobi is definitely worth a mention when talking about the most difficult games on the PlayStation 2. Thanks to everyone that watched to the end, your time is much appreciated. If you like this style of video, I'm open to suggestions of retro games to look at next. But until next time guys, I'll catch you all on the next video. Oh, cool. Oh, Shinobi. Oh.